Good evening, everybody. Tonight we're going to be taking a look at literal equations. Now that may sound a little ominous at first, but actually it's quite simple. Really what you're going to be dealing with is something that looks like this, where you only have variables. And I'm going to ask you to solve in terms of one of those variables. So this is used a lot when we're given equations. Circumference equals 2 pi r, volume of a cylinder, where instead of finding the volume, we're looking to find one of the other terms because we've been given the volume, we've been given the circumference, and we need to manipulate the equation so it is solving for the unknown that we are seeking. So let's go and start with some examples, and we'll see how this goes. Okay, so you can see in this example we are trying to solve y equals mx plus b, and most probably your very important concept number one is to find out exactly what you're solving for. So in this case we are solving for x, and so we have y equals mx plus b. And our goal, and I recommend that you do this on every problem, is if we're solving for x, we write x equals. We're trying to get to x equals something. Well, let's take a look at this over here. What I did was I replaced the y with a number, I replaced the m with a number, and I replaced the b with a number. If we were given this particular problem, I think at this point in our algebra career, we would know that the first thing that we would do is subtract 6 from both sides. Well, if we look over here, we have m times x plus b. What is being added or subtracted to the variable I'm trying to solve? In this case, it's b. We use the additive inverse, and so I subtract b from both sides. Now I have y minus b equals mx, and over here we would have our number equals 2x. How would I get rid of the 2? Well, or how would I eliminate the 2? Well, I would divide by 2. How would I get rid of the m then? Well, I divide by m, and what I do on one side I do on the other. And so the answer to our first equation is y equals y minus b over m. And so you can see from that if you're a little confused about what your first step is, replace the variables that you're not solving for with just a different number. How would you handle this if it was a number? Well, I would do the additive inverse. Okay, well, it's a variable, we're not solving for it, so do the additive inverse. How would I eliminate the m if it was a number? Well, I would divide by it. Well, then I'm going to divide by it and keep everything square like I just did over here. So this one, we're looking to solve this equation for b, so I'm going to write over here b equals, because that's my goal. And so the first thing is if you are still a little confused about what to do, if you had these numbers with your variable, what would you do? Well, obviously we'd combine like terms if they were numbers, but we're not allowed to do that when they're variables. But we could subtract, and we could subtract. So what can I do with my 2c? I can subtract. What can I do with my 2a? I can subtract, and I can subtract. What I do on one side, I do on the other. So I have p minus 2a minus 2c. 2a minus 2a goes away. 2c minus 2c gives me 2b. Well, if I have 2b equals, how do I get rid of the 2? I divide by 2. How do I get rid of the 2 here? I divide by 2. And so my final answer, p minus 2a minus 2c all over 2. Great. Well, what I'd like you to do is take a look at these two problems and solve them for me. Do the work, And then when you get to the post video quiz, I will repost this particular question with a multiple choice, and you can put the answers into the post video quiz. Alright, so if you want to pause the video at this point, you can solve these two problems. Alright, now we have something slightly more complicated. We have solve for k, and we have y over x, k equals d. Well, I'm solving for k, so let's take a look. If this was a number, 3, 2, k, and I'm solving for k, how would I eliminate the 3 over 2? Well, again, hopefully at this point in your algebra career, you know that you're going to multiply this by its multiplicative inverse. Well, if that's the case, what could I do to get rid of y over x? Well, I can multiply it by its multiplicative inverse. And what I do on one side, I do on the other. X divided by x, y divided by y, and I'm left with k equals dx over y. So if I'm required to solve with basically a fraction in front of the variable, I'm just going to flip those two variables. I'm going to take the multiplicative inverse of them to get rid of it. And we'll have a chance tomorrow to practice that. And then the last type of problem that you may run into, that is probably the most confusing for everybody, is what do I do when I'm solving for a variable and my variable is in the denominator? Well, that's a difficult one, isn't it? Or initially you think it's difficult, but actually there's quite a few easy ways to make sure that we can get that x. Okay, so let me give you a couple of ideas that you can do. Idea number one. I hope that you'll agree that that's a true statement. Remember from your ratio days, yk over x equals d over 1. We are allowed to cross multiply. And so I end up with dx equals yk. I'm solving for x. I divide by d, and I have x equals yk over d. Actually, that looked pretty simple, didn't it? What's another technique you can do? Well, if you don't like that technique, what I do on one side, I do on the other. I multiply both sides by x. This x disappears, and now I have dx, and I have yk equals dx. Solving for x. Divide by my coefficient, divide by my coefficient, and I'm finished. So our goal every single time, determine which variable we're solving for. Write myself a little note so I don't solve for the wrong variable. Figure out how I can isolate my variable. Again, we're going to simplify, isolate my variable. Once it's isolated, I'm going to divide away any coefficient that I have. And if it's some kind of complicated fraction, just multiply by its multiplicative inverse, which is a fancy way of saying flip the fraction. I have two more problems for you to solve. I'd like for you to work on those two problems, and then in the post video quiz I'll repost them, and we'll see how you do. And tomorrow we'll have plenty of time to practice and go over any questions. Once again, make sure you post your questions on the post video quiz, and I think tonight we're going to put this in quiz number 23. So good luck tonight, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.